All right, welcome back to the KFYR Plus News Desk. And there was once a time when picking up a phone call was the main mode of communication. Well, but now the endless choices are available, like some tech savvy Gen Zs are consumed with anxiety by the ringing of a phone. And I gotta be honest, sometimes I am as well. Here to help us better understand why there is a telephobia amongst now Gen Z is David C. Olcott, a workplace expert and CEO of Samurai Success. Welcome, David. Thank you for joining me today.
Jay, thanks for having me on.
You got it. Well, can you explain what telephobia is and why it seems to be more prevalent among Gen Z?
So, telephobia is actually an experience we've been having for a lot of generations, but it really seems to have culminated now recently in Gen X's because they just haven't been practicing what you and I did so naturally, picking up the phone. You remember those long cords and things
Sure.
we used to trip over and things like that? And that
Yeah.
household where everybody was gathered around the phone and stuff. We were just constantly immersed in that. The kids, the new generation, just haven't been practicing this much. When you don't practice something, that knowledge becomes perishable, and it actually creates fear within us, so that we don't want to be able to take those phone calls because we just don't know how to do it.
Sure. And so, how does this manifest into the workplace? And what are some common signs that an employee might be struggling with telephobia?
Yeah, so some of the things that, if you have a sales job, right, that's your business, and you're going to have somebody getting on the phone. One of the big things we talk about with people is that make sure in your interview process that you allow for demonstration, right? People have to be able to show that they can actually do this because, curriculum vitae or a resume or lots of years of experience doesn't mean you can actually demonstrate the skill set that's necessary for the job. So in the interview process, make sure you allow for that demonstration and just see how people respond and react in a sales situation to that phone. Because if they have that phobia, they're really going to struggle, and it's going to impact the quality products and services you can offer to people.
So, how does this anxiety affect Gen Z's professional development and even their job performance?
So they're very gifted in so many other ways. Do you remember? I don't know if you, you had a dad like mine, but I used to have to, when we did this switching of the clocks, I used to have to go change his VCR clock every single
Sure.
year,
Yeah.
twice a year, right? I was like, oh, I don't want to do that anymore, kind of stuff. Well,
Yeah.
that my father was incredibly intelligent, Jay. I mean, just this amazing man who was just can do anything, and yet that clock drove him crazy, and it was simply because he just didn't practice it enough. So
Hmm.
as we go through these generational things, we always think about intelligence or something else. It is not about that at all. It's about practice of what they find is important. And they would much rather text or email than actually directly communicate. And that's definitely creating a problem in the society because if we're going to connect with human beings, we have to be able to do this interaction with each other. They're just not very well practiced at.
So, what are some long term impacts on their careers if this issue is not addressed?
Well, if our businesses continue going this way and they're not going, we're going to have this pull in our labor and business situation. So, universities, colleges, even parents have an opportunity to be able to start teaching our kids. We know what the future looks like. We're living in that future as adults. We just
Hmm.
have to get our kids prepped for that reality of things, as opposed to this fantasy that we seem to want to have our kids grow up in kind of stuff. We got to start talking reality, getting those kids prepped and prepare them and train them to be able to really take advantage of that. Some of the long-term disadvantages of not learning this skill set are going to be taken care of by technology. They're just so gifted at this AI stuff, right? And they're using all this technology, but it doesn't give them the opportunity to think for themselves. And that self-reliance then changes to reliance on computers and AI generation machines. You're not really creating that creativity that we as humans and Americans especially are so gifted at.
Sure. So, how has the evolution of communication technology contributed to the rise of this telephobia among the Gen Z? Of course, as you mentioned earlier, you've got the texting, you've got the emailing, and now video sharing.
Yeah, and let's add social media to that because now you're getting blasted with all these different opinions about things. This is what this is happening. This is how this is. And let me tell you what's going on with this situation. That creates a lot of uncertainty, chaos, and ultimately leads to fear. So now I'm a youngster, right? I'm not really sure what I want to do in this lifetime. I'm not really sure who I am. I'm still sorting all the stuff that you and I had to figure out. And now I've got all these conspiracy theories and all this other additional information that you and I didn't have access to. And by the way, Jay, I'm so thankful I didn't have social media when I was growing up
Yes.
and dating. Oh my gosh, I would have been in trouble. Because not that I was a bad person, it was just like I didn't want my life out there. And these kids are dealing with that. I mean, everything about them is on social media. You can find out anything you want about me or you through social media, and that terrifies most people.
It does. And David, I got to say, I'm kind of thankful that I didn't grow up in this day and age as well. Of course, you'd learn, you'd adapt, and I just don't know how I would be as far as, but I think these kids nowadays, they really do have a lot of challenges when it comes to growing in this day and age. I mean, there's just so much more than what we did when you and I, came up. So, how important are traditional communication skills, say phone etiquette, in our digital workplace these days?
And that's surprising because as this AI and this other technology advances so quickly, human technology, our ability to communicate with other, has been very slow to advance. As a matter of fact, there's a 1957 Harvard study that hasn't changed in all these years. All this technology changes every 6 months. We as humans in communication, we still are doing the same things. But it says very clearly to be able to get to communicate with people, your words have about 7% impact on people. 38% of your ability to communicate effectively is with your tones. 55% of your ability to communicate effectively, get someone else to take action, Jay, is based upon your gestures.
Hmm.
Guess what? When I'm texting and emailing, I don't get tones and gestures. I've just lost all that ability. 93% of my ability to effectively communicate with someone else is gone. So how do I change that is going to be the real issue moving forward.
What kind of training or support can employers provide to help Gen Z employees overcome phone anxiety? Or even maybe, as you mentioned also earlier, maybe the schools could start with this as well.
Yeah, we've got to get back to a place where our businesses and our school university systems are back in alignment as opposed to the amazing distrust they have right now. If we're going to build a society that we keep saying that we want to build as America. So the very first thing that's really important about that is making sure that people know that there's access right now outside of the universities. There's great seminars, there's great programming, there's great coaching that can actually help people develop these skill sets and capabilities. So you're not alone. There's a lot of companies actually coming to the marketplace to help service this group of people who really struggle with this, but is a naturally and necessary essential component of being able to work in the workplace.
Are there any specific or special skill sets that Gen Z might be lacking due to their reliance on the digital communications these days?
Yeah, it's kind of like when I'm working with a computer or something like this, I just have to worry about my script or what I want to put inputs into this. I'm not looking for those outputs that are coming in. And as human experience, I'm saying something to you and you're nodding your head or not nodding your head, and me being able to clue into that is
Hmm.
essential for me being able to understand if you understand what I'm saying to you. And
Sure.
if not, if I'm not checking with those cues, right, then I'm not really sure if you're even paying attention. You understand what I'm saying? And I just keep rambling on. So when I isolate myself and I'm just working with those machines, it just takes full on inputs. It doesn't need me to observe if I'm communicating effectively. So that's a big missing component with the kids today.
Yeah. So, how do you see the future of the workplace communication evolving, and what role will phone calls play in that evolution?
So I definitely know that technology is really going to shift this, and we've got to get prepared for that. And these kids, by the way, are fabulous with this technology. They're
Yeah.
gifted beyond belief, right? They'll run circles around me all day long with this stuff. But it's the interaction that we need to be able to get to, because I believe we're about to swing the pendulum the other way, where so much of social media, so much of it is about, let me just tell you about my world, even if it isn't true. I think we're going to go back to a place very shortly of authenticity, Jay. And I really mean that. And that authenticity is this connection that you and I have with each other right here that's so important in that, and starting to build trust with each other. And that communication is going to be really the frontier of the future.
One of the things that I noticed, and I've got kids, they're so adaptive You know, I mean, they can catch on to something so much faster. Of course, can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? We already know that old adage. But these kids nowadays really are so adaptive, David.
Yes, adaptive and incredibly flexible. That's some really great things. And remember, this is a group and generation that spend a lot of time by themselves. Our
Hmm.
generation, if we were ever by ourselves, you find people playing their radio really loud, their television on. They had to have some kind of something happening in the room.
Right,
They
right.
couldn't just be by themselves. But these kids, wow, they can sit in a room for hours and totally live purposely of what they want to be able to do. And that's a fascinating new trait for us to take a look at is how can you be so isolated and still feel fulfilled? Now, a lot of people are dealing with that issue where they are being alone and they're not being fulfilled. So that'd be another conversation for sure.
Yeah.
But this is really about, hey, they do like themselves because they are spending time with themselves.
What practical tips, David, would you give to Gen Zs who are trying to overcome their fear of this, I guess, telephobia?
Great. So the best thing, as a matter of fact, if you go to any of these programs, I haven't attended them myself, but I talked to some of the experts in the field. And I will tell you the primary tool in these seminars and these programs is something called role playing, which means I just sit in a room across from somebody, I can see them, and I start the phone conversation. And I just have this, hey, I'm just dealing with this, and here's my script, and we're going back and forth. And then I actually turn away from the other person so I can't visually see you. And that's where most people start getting pretty confused because once they can't see the other person, their mind starts kicking in, their distrust for things really start kicking in. And that's where a lot of this phobia comes from is like, oh, I can't see those cues that I'm looking for in this visual like you and I have. I can't see you, so I'm having to listen to my own brain about what the other person is saying, and they're not picking up on it as quickly with visual cues as they can auditory cues. So role playing and making sure you just do some really quick things to make sure you just practice because practice makes permanent.
Yeah. David, at the outset, I told you that I might have a hint of telephobia in me as well. It's those Friday nights you're sitting down and you got diners, drive-ins, and dives on. You got a nice pizza. You're settled in for the night. And somebody decides to call you when it could be taken care of in a text or whatever it might be. Those are the phone calls that I mean, just like anybody else, right? You just don't want to have that phone call. So that's the phobia that I have from the telephone.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, with parents, right? We get that whole feeling is like, what time of the night is that phone call come in? Because that sends off my other alarm system. It goes, hey, if this after 8 o'clock and my kids aren't home, and all of a sudden I'm getting a call, I'm going into emergency mode, right? So we have a bit of that Pavlov dogs going on for ourselves that just says, hey, when someone's calling this late and the kids aren't in, what does that mean? And we start getting into that
Yeah,
scarcity mode.
absolutely. David Olcott, thank you so much. I appreciate the insights.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks for having
Have
me.
a great day.